Welcome back to Double Fries No Slaw Sunday evening. Trying to catch this right in the middle of this halftime of this final Elite Eight game. Richie, Michigan State and Auburn. I think Auburn's going to kind of pull away and end up winning this thing going away. But Michigan State's at least made it a game. It was pretty bad to start. But presented by Guthrie's, powered by BetUS. We'll give some love to others here in a little while. But Richie, how's your weekend been?
It's been good. Nice, quiet yesterday, and today, just the wife gave me the honey-do list and just working on the house a little bit. But nice and relaxing. It's nice to not leave the house for a weekend for once.
Yeah, we had a birthday party this weekend, but it was literally like in the neighborhood, so we just walked to it. That was really nice. I mean, we went to church this morning. I've got some family in town, so we did go to lunch after church, but then just came home. Like it wasn't, hasn't been too crazy. So yeah, a good weekend. No complaints over here either. But and just a lot of basketball. I've watched, all 8 of the Elite Eight games, or all 4 of the Elite Eight games, all 8 teams, and some good games. Actually, you know what? I take that back. The Florida game was the only good game. Most of these have not been that good.
Maryland played a great first half, but that second half, Florida, they just
that
hit
was
the
the 16
so hard.
Yeah, that was the Elite Eight games just feel like they haven't been great. The Florida one was great. Obviously, I didn't like the result, but I thought the Florida game was fun.
We talked about it last week, but the tournament as a whole has not been very exciting. But if we end up with all 4 1 seeds, I think we'll have a phenomenal Final Four.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think Auburn, which it looks like that's what we've got, right? So at the time of this recording, and the time that we're live, yeah, it looks like if Auburn beats Michigan State, then which it's halftime of that game, then that's what we'll get. But yeah, I mean, I don't really want it. Like the best case scenario to me would be Auburn versus Houston final. Like that would be the best thing that could happen in my book. What we're probably going to get is the opposite of that, Florida and Duke. And I told a buddy this last night. As a neutral, Florida versus Duke would be like, I don't want to say it. Yeah, I phrase the way I say this a little bit differently, but like just basketball heaven, maybe is a nice way. Like if you didn't care about either team, Florida versus Duke would be a really fun national championship.
I will be the biggest Cooper Flag fan in the world.
Oh, yeah. In Cooper, we trust. Yeah, I'll definitely go Duke every day over that. Half our fans cheer for Duke anyway. But
or North Carolina.
But if you weren't a Florida State fan, Florida versus Duke would be an amazing national championship to get. I just don't want to see it. Like I would give me Duke versus Auburn. I'd love to see Auburn win. Give me Houston versus Auburn. That'd be fine with me. But I certainly don't want to see the Gators lift this thing up. But they are really good. Shout out the comeback last night. You got to hit the front end of 1-and-1s, but they shot the lights out for about a minute and a half.
Job. Yeah, horrible choke job.
It was really bad.
What's worse in tournament history when you look at the magnitude of what was on the line.
Yeah. All right, let's get into things and talk a little FSU. I know you guys didn't tune in to hear our bad basketball takes. You turned in to hear our bad football takes. Double Fries No Slaw, brought to you by Guthrie's. We appreciate them for their support. You can visit all 3 of their locations, 1818 West Tennessee, 2550 North Monroe, and 2870 Apalachee Parkway. If you're anywhere near a Guthrie's, it doesn't necessarily just have to be in Tallahassee. Make sure you are stopping in and supporting. Oh, I don't know if I can say this just yet. Richie, I'll tell you off air. Maybe, log into the Discord. Maybe you can find out this later. But I did hear some good Guthrie's news. Again, maybe people wouldn't even care about this, but I don't know if I'm allowed to say what I almost did. But let's get into things. Let's talk about it. First up, yesterday, what's today? Yeah, Saturday, Florida State had a scrimmage. I'm just going to go through some notes. I had about a 30-minute phone call or two after the scrimmage was finished up and got some notes, got some things from some folks in there. Obviously, the media is not around at practice, but they've never really been at the scrimmages. So this isn't really anything new. And we typically do kind of hear some news and notes coming out of them. I thought that Castellano, so just here we roll, right? Like I'll go through some of the things I heard, Richie, and then we can kind of talk about it. Castellano struggled at times. My guy didn't. I've seen mixed things on this, but my guy didn't seem to think it was so much of an accuracy issue as much of a like reading the zone thing. Good, which maybe that's a good thing for Florida State fans defensively. Just we haven't seen them play zone well or effectively or much at all. Under the previous regime. So it sounded like Castellano struggled a little bit with that. My guy kind of pushed back on it being just a pure accuracy thing, more so of a confusion thing. Not really surprising the defense would be ahead of the offense to start things out. Brock had an okay day, but he was with the second string offensive line, and I heard the gap between kind of your second string defensive line and your second string offensive line is pretty significant. Maybe good news on the defensive side, maybe bad news on the offensive side. You kind of have to like measure both things. With anybody you hear having a good day, does that mean the other side had a bad day? I don't know. But the second string defensive line just absolutely dominated the first string or the second string offensive line. And so it was hard for Brock to really get anything going. The defense was certainly better on the day, which again, early in spring, not maybe too big of a surprise there. Defense seemed to fluster the offense pretty regularly. Again, I think early in camp, that's not super surprising. Multiple people said this, and then Norvell commented on it too, but my guy said, dude, Kevin Sperry was the best quarterback out there. And listen, we're just going to call a spade at this point. I told him, I said, I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know if the guy that's been on campus 3 months being your best quarterback out there on the field is necessarily a good thing. But, he said that Sperry had a really nice day and made a couple of nice throws. And, maybe good for the future. Maybe, trying to read into who had a good day on just the first scrimmage. But, you would not necessarily want that trend to continue. I'll stay on the offense and then we'll flip over to defense. I said Biscuit looked really good, had like 120 yards on 2 receptions. It took one really short pass and then ran for like 50 yards on it. He said like it was literally like the other side of the field, like 65 yards, 70 yards. Trucked a couple of safeties. I won't mention any names. Maybe we'll throw those in the Discord later. I don't know. We'll see. But literally trucked a couple of safeties. Never going to be the most fleet of foot, but certainly moves pretty well for his size. They said he was the best looking tight end on the day by far. Cam Davis caught a lot of passes out of the backfield, which was a little bit interesting. Obviously had a big drop to start the year last year, but using him in kind of a pass catching role is pretty impressive. Lucas had a really nice 40-yard touchdown run. We'll talk a little running versus passing here in a minute, but it was kind of I said Lucas came in on a lot of like almost not like gadget plays, but like they don't line him up as a traditional tailback or anything like that. They said the tailback reps were pretty split between Cam, Roydell, and Singleton ran a lot. The running game was pretty tough to get going. They said that, again, a plus maybe for the defense, and we'll get more into defense in a second, but said that the defense did stop the run fairly well outside of that long touchdown run. Andre Otto stood out as having a good day on that second string offensive line, though the second string defensive line certainly did a good job on them. Gunnar Hansen looked pretty good. Michael Pettis is pretty physically imposing to see right now. That's it. Let's talk a little offense. Anything out of that, Richie, give you concern, excitement, anything on your end out of the offensive side that we brought back?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the lack of depth at the offensive line position. I think that's why you have a new offensive line coach right now, because, and this goes up to the top, but they have not recruited well on the offensive line. And for the defensive line, the depth there sounds like a positive. But again, if the second string offensive line for Florida State this year is as concerning as we think it is our second string defense line really that good, or are they just that much better than what they're going up against? So that's a big thing. And to your point, the defense is always ahead of the offense early in spring football, early in fall camp. That's just the nature of the sport, and that's pretty much anywhere you go, unless you have like an Oklahoma type offense that's just running it up and down the field or tossing it up and down the field. Back when they had Baker, but yeah, I think it is a little concerning, the offensive line, because we see injuries on the offensive line almost every year since Norvell's been here, and that's not unique to Florida State. That happens at pretty much everywhere. But you really need to. Last year Norvell said we have 10 guys, and offensive line was just complete trash.
Yeah.
So how do we have 10 guys and we're just complete trash? So, it's tough when you're not seeing it firsthand. But according to your intel, it does sound like the offensive line will be a concern, especially if they were struggling to just run the ball, which is a strength of Gus Malzahn offenses.
Yeah, and again, everything kind of with a grain of salt, right? Like it's hard to know if the offense looks really good or really poor. Was the defense just playing really well, or did the defense look good because the offense just was atrocious, right? Like it's hard to know one way or the other. Said Amari, so defensively, maybe give you some hope if the offensive side was lackluster. Again, hopefully the defense didn't just look good because of the offense struggling. But again, it is new. It is, these are the first times you're getting going really with a new quarterback, a new OC, a new offensive line coach, four new offensive linemen. This is not like, I don't think anything I heard was super shocking. Amari Williams looked really good. I was a name that, they said that he looks, pretty good to go, pretty, like locked in, like set on the defense side of the ball, was making plays, and a name that he was pretty excited about seeing out there. Your other starters, McCray, Williams, the other Williams, James Williams from Nebraska, and Darrell Jackson, who Jackson did a good job. The defense certainly won the day. But the defensive line did a fairly nice job. On the running game, I asked what was the problem with the running game? It was like the defensive line just beating guys, and this was encouraging. They said the linebackers fit gaps a lot better. They said that the linebackers really did a good job of getting downhill, closing off running lanes. They said Juice Cryer, Caleb Lavelli, the transfer from UNC, young kid, and then Omar Graham all looked really good. Herring looked good, transfer from, I believe, Memphis. They said the linebackers, it was the words used, again, not my words, someone else's. The words used were night and day difference from last year. Now, is that a new offense? Is that a new, is that the offensive line not being good? I don't know, right? How do you judge how good the linebackers were when you don't really know how competent the offense is yet? Again, I don't know. But just the way they looked yesterday, linebacker play was a lot better. And linebacker play is certainly a concern of mine right now. Maybe a little less after scrimmage one, but there's a long way to go until you face off against Alabama and the horses and studs that they've got. But linebacker players is something that I think needs to continue to trend up and get better. And so, encouraging to hear that. Defensive backs, Arnaud, Rawls, Lester all stood out at DB. I heard Quindarius Jones, was good. Like really, they said the entire secondary looks really good. How much of that is, the offense, again, not having their best day? I'm sure it plays into it some, but they're a lot more aggressive, and in zone, they mix up the looks a lot. And, they are certainly, how did he kind of described it as like they are like a point of emphasis is trying to force turnovers. And I think Florida State did we have 7? Did we force 7 turnovers last year? Was that the number? It was just an abysmally low number, like a half a turnover a game for the entire season. And that's just insanely bad. And that's a huge point of emphasis and something that they seem to do a better job with yesterday. Relatively clean game, a couple of DPIs, 1 delay of game and offsides, not a ton of penalties. It sounds like they weren't really calling holdings, one way or the other, or on the offensive line. So, that could factor into some of that. But a relatively clean game, a relatively good amount of, scrimmage, a good amount of focus, good intensity, all things like, do they care this year? Certainly, didn't seem to last year, whether that was in practice or not. I think they really like Jake Weinberg, not to go too heavy on the special teams. Richie, I listened to an old episode where we broke down our favorite plays in FSU history, and 4 of my 5 were special teams plays. So maybe that's just what I do on this channel. But they said that Weinberg was described as both a sniper and being able to hit anything, and then also have an absolute cannon. They said he hits 55-yard field goals, and they land 2/3 up the. They're not just falling over for the crossbar. They're hitting 2/3 up the way, on the net, which is encouraging, right? You want a kid that can absolutely boom it. And Fitzgerald did a good job of that last year, and you may continue to have that. Jalen Lucas, Singleton, Danzy, all kind of your punt returners, kick returners. That was in an outside portion, just obviously, punting in the indoor and kicking in the indoor a little bit different. But and my guy didn't go out and watch that, but he said those are kind of your guys that have been lining up there. And then we'll talk, a little bit about this maybe later, but Norvell being not so immersed in the offense, being able to pay more attention and really mix things up and get into it and get other areas of the team, the secondary, the defensive line, the linebackers, and then all the positions on offense, like really being able to give more attention because he's not so immersed in the offense seemed to be pretty positive. Like the defensive guys like him, getting up and coaching them up and celebrating with them and doing big things with them. Whereas typically he's just completely zoned in on the offense and not paying attention to other things. So I don't know how successful overall the whole Gus Malzahn thing will be from a down to down perspective. I do think that Norvell being more accessible to the entire team, probably an overall plus. Obviously that doesn't even factor in all the other things that a head coach has to do, like recruit your own roster and worry about salaries and NIL and everything else. So that seems to be a plus. And then in our, I was told the split on run to pass was closer to 70-30. I've seen other people say like 60-40. I don't know. It kind of probably depends on how many plays you think they actually ran, because all three coaches said like three different numbers. One was like 110, one was 100, one was like 120. So yeah, that percentage could be based on the number of plays that they actually think they ran out there. But very run heavy, very run focused. We'll talk about that in our next segment. But any thoughts on the defense or Norvell or special teams?
Yeah, again, I really like the defense line we have coming in this year. We'll see how they play. I'm not sure you have an All-American. I think Daryl Jackson probably has the best chance to be that guy. Very encouraged to hear your updates on the linebacker room and filling gaps. And, I think a lot of that just comes down to coaching. A lot of positions, the coach doesn't really coach the players that much. Dalvin Cook wasn't an elite running back because of his running back coach. Same could go for receiver, defensive back to an extent. But linebacker, I remember in the Willie Taggart era, we were just getting gashed in the run game on defense. And then literally the week we brought Jim Leavitt in to help out, it was a complete difference. Like they were actually filling the gaps and stopping runs. And that's going to be really important this year, especially if we're going to be a run heavy team like Gus Malzahn traditionally likes to be. Because the games are going to be shorter. You're going to have fewer possessions. So you're going to have to stop these runs. Linebacker was my biggest question mark heading into spring camp, right? Just in front of the offensive line. Everywhere else, I feel fairly comfortable. Obviously quarterback is what everyone looks at. But, to hear that the linebackers are, at least in one scrimmage came out and did well and understood the assignments, that's very encouraging to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, my thoughts on the season haven't changed after one scrimmage, pro or con. Like I'm not more negative or more positive about the season. It's one piece of information that you can kind of look at and go from there. But I think there are certainly positive takeaways, and linebacker play, defensive line play is certainly one of them. I think they'll be really good in the secondary. And so this defense, I think, has a pretty big chance to take a pretty big step forward. To be very fair, I think the offense has a pretty decent chance to take a step forward from 13 points a game last year too, right? So you can almost luck your way into 13 points a game. And that's what Florida State had to do a lot last year. But I think both sides take a pretty good step this year. And, you take a decent step and you're looking at 7 or 8 wins instead of, 2 or 3 from last year. So, all right, before we go on, I do want to talk a little bit about that run split, talk with you more about that 60-40. But first, I do want to give some love to our friends over at BetUS. If you're watching any of the Final Four this week, if you follow the NFL, NBA, MLB is up and rolling as well. You can go follow BetUS TV on all of your social media platforms. They do a great So again, fingers crossed. I hate to cheer for Duke, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend at this point. And so, go Blue Devils, go Cooper Flag. But BetUS TV is doing a good job of covering all that stuff. So go check them out over on social media. Richie, with the 60-40 split of rushing, I don't know, maybe I could be thinking about this too in depth, but for a run heavy team, a run heavy offense, is there anything about that concerns you? Like, let's talk a little pros and cons about being a really run heavy team.
Yeah, I actually like it. Obviously, college football today and in recent years has been very pass heavy, but I think you have pretty good depth in your running back room. The only concern I have is what we talked about earlier, the offensive line depth. If you have two offensive linemen go down and you have two backups in 1 week, how effective can you really be? But I think, Gus Malzahn has shown that it works. Look, obviously his 2013 team, of course, he had Trey Mason. We do not have a Trey Mason on the roster. But, he did not fear running the football, running the quarterback as well, which I think he does have a quarterback that we assume will be starting who can run the ball. I'm more old school. I like running the football. Obviously everybody loves a 9 route for a touchdown, 60 yards. But I just
Especially
love
you when you play NCAA.
Yeah.
Just for what it's worth.
Yeah, if you have a 99 speed receiver. But no, I think there's something emasculating to a defense when you just run the ball for 3, 4, 5 yards every play and just keep picking up first downs. It just demoralizes them. And that's the brand of football that I absolutely love to see.
Yeah, I agree with you on the depth of the offensive line. And, I think another, but to start positive, right? I'll start this with somewhat positivity. I also think that mixing in the quarterback run. I mean, Castellanos ran for over 1,000 yards a couple of years ago. I mean, he was very effective with his legs, and just being able to use that as a numbers advantage. Now he's got to be smart, because I don't know how many, like, if I was giving, if I was giving you 10.5, like, are you taking the over? Like, how many games he plays the full game?
Who's that?
Castellanos. Like, if you anticipate,
I won't even pronounce his last name because I got roasted in the chat last week.
Dude, like by 6 people.
But I think he plays all 12 games.
You think he plays the full? But I mean, probably, right? Because injuries are less likely to happen than more. But I mean, certainly it doesn't surprise you when a mobile quarterback misses time.
No.
You think about Lagway missed time last year, Quinn Ewers missed time last year. Like, it's pretty common for guys to get hurt and banged up when they run. And I
think he's experienced enough at this point. He's a veteran quarterback. He's ran the ball. I think he knows how to run smart and safe. And I think that's a big difference, because it's typically the younger quarterbacks that you see that are mobile quarterbacks that get injured because they're just not used to knowing when to get down or when to get out of bounds. I think he's going to be fine, to be honest.
It's typically the younger guys. I won't mention what happened here 2 years ago because my heart's still broken. But yeah, I mean, just the freak stuff. It's just the number of times you take hits, right? And so, but I do think as a pro, Castellanos' legs is a big deal, and that certainly helps a lot. I do worry a little bit about not only the depth of the offensive line, but just the newness of the offensive line. We've talked about this, but they've got some tough games early, and I think the schedule in October gets a little easier post Miami. But man, like you're gonna be an underdog twice at home, and then you're gonna go play a conference road game, which conference road games on Friday nights are always really tough. And, there's certainly a difference between Miami's and Alabama's defensive line and then Virginia's, right? And that's no shot at Virginia. We'll see how they start the year. Maybe they will be a favorite when we come up there. But, man, you've got to figure stuff out pretty quickly. And, I thought last year the defense struggled so much to get the ball, to get off the field, and it really limited possessions that you had. I mean, there were times where we'd have 4 possessions in the first half. And so if you're running the ball, does that, if you're not able to do that effectively off the bat, which they were in 22 and then to some extent in 23 as well, does that put Castellanos in even tougher situations on 3rd and long? And so, I don't know. I worry about it a little bit about being run heavy. I think I'd prefer it. It's what Mike wants to do. It's what Gus wants to do for sure. And so if they can coach it well, if Herb Hand, who has the experience with Gus, can have them in good positions, then it's a minor concern. I wouldn't call it like some kind of major concern or, oh man, I can't believe they're going to run the ball more in the past. Like, I'm not that worried about things, but I don't know. I mean, is there a running back on this roster that instills just an insane amount of confidence in you? Right. I'm not saying that I'm taking any shots at anybody, but like nobody showed me anything yet on this that's on this roster that I think like, oh yeah, there's our guy, right? You're kind of hoping one emerges.
Yeah, I like him by committee. Like, obviously, there's no Dalvin Cook on this roster, but I think you have plenty of capable running backs. And throwing a guy like Jalen Lucas into the mix, who, is just an absolute burner. His acceleration would be a 99 on CFB 25. You have a lot of pieces to work with. You just don't have that one dominant guy. And again, Florida State probably will never have another Dalvin Cook because he was the best running back in program history.
Yeah, no, I agree. I guys like him and Dunn come around once every 20 years, right? And so that's not too crazy to say. I mean, I guess unless you're like Georgia or Alabama, on their current streak, Ohio State. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I mean, I think it also kind of plays into why you brought in Castellanos, like you didn't necessarily want to be a pass heavy team. He had a really good touchdown interception ratio. He did a good job taking care of the ball. I think he had 18 touchdowns to 5 picks, but that's not him throwing the ball all over the yard. And I think he would probably have a similar, it would surprise me if he had more, around 20 touchdowns would kind of be where I would think that he gets this year. If he got to 25 plus, I'd say that's pretty, I mean, he's had a pretty special year at that point, or we're just down by a ton and having to throw the ball all over the place, which I don't necessarily anticipate. But yeah, I don't know. I think the run heavy side of what we'll do is interesting. And I mean, after just a horrid rushing attack last year, not that the passing attack was much better, but after a horrid rushing attack last year, you just kind of hope that it takes off quickly, because if not, you just make things more difficult on yourself. And last year I probably felt the best about Lawrence. I felt better about Toafili going into last year than I do any singular guy this year. And so that probably concerns me a little bit too. Again, not shots at Cam Davis or Roy Dale Williams or anybody else. I'd love for one of them to really emerge, but we'll kind of see how they end up playing out. Let me give some love to Garnet Gold, and then we will move on to one more segment that, man, I feel like I've been a negative Nancy about this today. But garnetgold.com, if you are shopping with them, make sure you use our code NOSLAW, NOSLAW, for 15% off. We appreciate them for all their support, all that they do for not only us, but FSU athletics, working in NIL and all the different avenues that they do. Garnetandgold.com. Again, NOSLAW, NOSLAW. If you're up there this week for the Seminole Sports Weekend, make sure that you are stopping by Garnet and Gold as well. Everybody's in town this weekend, so I know football's not doing anything, but there's beach volleyball, both men's and women's tennis. Baseball has a big series against Wake, and softball welcomes maybe UVA to town. I don't know, I can't remember, but yeah, everybody's in town this weekend on the spring side of things. So if you're in town too, go check out Garnet and Gold. All right, let's talk a little recruiting. Florida State loses a recruit to Syracuse. Not maybe the most exciting news. And then, so that's Cameron Wilson, an edge prospect out of Miami. 3 stars, so maybe you guys are saying like, oh, no big deal. Did we really want him? Yes, he was a priority for Florida State. Zach Blostein of Knowles 247 literally put in a crystal ball for him when he was during Legacy Weekend last week. And so really liked FSU's chances with him. An in-state kid picks Syracuse over the Knowles today. A long way to go till signing day. The same way that you guys tell me every time we get a commit, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal because wait till signing day. The same is true here. The same is very true for Florida State, having a chance to get him to stay home. But it's not a good look to really want a kid and lose him to Syracuse when, by all accounts, things seem to be trending in your direction just last week.
Yeah, and I think one thing, especially about not to go all old man yelling at clouds, this younger generation is very influential. And if you were on a visit with him and what you see that he ended up picking Syracuse when Florida State had him as a priority, that's just a bad look because it starts to make other recruits start questioning themselves. Like, oh man, well, he chose Syracuse over Florida State because Florida State is still one of the biggest brands in the country. But when you cannot lose recruiting battles to Syracuse, especially from a homegrown in-state recruit. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's frustrating. Again, it's early. Recruiting typically picks up in about 2 months from now when June gets going and you have all these summer officials start picking up. But it's just a bad look because, again, like you said, oh, was a 3-star. Was he even a take for Florida State? Yes, he was a take for Florida State. Not only was he a take, Florida State really wanted him. And it's just frustrating to see the staff. And I know it's mostly a newer staff, but under Norvell struggle in high school recruiting. And, I don't know if it's a curse of Travis Hunter or what it could be, but it's just, it's frustrating as a fan who wants to see the best, most talented roster put together, who I show up to watch on Saturdays.
Yeah, Bo Bentley eliminates Florida State from consideration, releases a top 3 that Florida State's not in. He's a quarterback target that Florida State was certainly trying to make a move with. Richie, we're 2 days from it, but we're essentially into April now. Florida State obviously doesn't have a QB committed to this class and doesn't seem super close on having one in the fold either. And so, on that, so just a couple of pieces in recruiting news. I understand that there are probably some things working against this staff. I think negative recruiting is a very real thing. I think that other programs, other coaches are certainly using a 2-10 season against them. I think they're using Mike Norvell's future and just longevity here against Florida State. I think that I don't know the specifics around these 2 kids specifically. But I do think that Florida State at times has there's a perception around Florida State of being cheap. I don't think they're, I know the jokes would be that they're broke. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think that they just at times aren't willing to kind of push all their chips to the middle of the table on certain recruits. And so you lose out to them because of that. And then I think that you've also, I think you are looking at a brand new staff that it does take time to develop some relationships, and it does take time to really start to get kids trending your way. And that's not an overnight thing. But all of that said, Norvell knew that there were issues with recruiting, and it was his job to address those. And we'd like to think that he addressed some on-the-field things. We'd like to think that the offense maybe runs a little bit better without him being in the middle of it. We'd like to think the offensive line does a little bit better this year without him being in the middle of it. Obviously, fired Randy Shannon. You'd like to think that the linebackers look a little bit better. Tony White's got some experience. JP moves back there. You tried to upgrade your defensive line because obviously that wasn't very good. So we're hopeful that there are some changes on the field that we see, but I just don't know how confident I am in this staff being able to recruit. I had kind of said this has to be a top 15 class. I still think they'll get around there. So I'm not necessarily backing it down to 20 or anything like that. But I'm telling you, my confidence of it being much higher than 15 is fairly low right now. And I don't necessarily know that Mike went out and made all-star recruiting hires. We were all really, really excited about Terrence Knighton. I'm not telling you that I'm selling on him or that they need to move on again already. But you've got a 3-star from in your own state and you're losing him to Syracuse. That just can't happen. When you make a kid a priority and he's in the state of Florida, you just don't lose him. Now, you got a long way to go before December gets here to try and make up for that. But I don't know. It just doesn't instill a lot of confidence when that's happening now. And so I mentioned this to you off air. I don't know. You look at the talent that's on the team, and there is some good young talent. They brought in some good DBs. They brought in some good wide receivers like Elijah Moore and others that, Boggs, that you kind of hear his name flip from UCF. I think they've done a good job with certain positions. They did a good job at defensive end this year in recruiting. They've got some offensive line that I think that will show promise. They really like Ousmane Kroma, the running back. And so there's some good talent there. But it almost feels like Mike is doing everything he can to go all in on this season to get to 6 or 7 wins. And if he does that, he's going to be back for another year. And it's not like there's just a plethora of young talent on this roster that just needs to wait a year or two and then it'll be good. He's going to have to go live in the portal again after the December, in the December, transfer window again, and he's gonna have to find a quarterback, and he's gonna have to do that. And so I don't know. I don't have a ton of confidence long term when I see what we're doing recruiting. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I don't think they're getting elite guys. It's great that Hayes Fawcett hasn't mentioned us much, committed to XYZ over these 3 schools. He's never mentioned us because we're not in it for any of the elite guys. So at least we don't get trolled like this kid picked another school over us, because we're not in it for those guys. And that has been a hallmark of Norvell's tenure here. There have been spurts where we did recruit really well. I'm not jumping ship off of the Florida State bandwagon because it's April and we're not recruiting well. But man, with the way that kids are moving up their timelines, a lot of kids are committing in April and May and June, as opposed to like August and September, or waiting until close to signing day. You can certainly flip some guys, and they flip some guys around signing day. And so, yes, that can absolutely happen. This was actually the best close I think we've seen from Mike Norvell yet, but it just doesn't instill a lot of confidence as to which direction this program is going. And I know there's a lot of negative around the program, but I don't know. I've certainly got concerns about where the recruiting is right now. And again, it's not just the one kid. It's not just the quarterback. It's just, overall, it doesn't look real good right now.
Yeah, and right now the majority of elite prospects have already been crystal balled to some school. And, crystal balls, I think more often than not, they are pretty accurate. And if you don't have a quarterback right now, like we talked about earlier, that's a problem. Because quarterbacks are the very first elite prospects to commit to a school. It's one thing for a running back or a linebacker or someone else, but quarterbacks, they are usually locked in by June at the latest, the good ones that everybody wants. And to your point, the majority of the trend has been that a lot of these high school prospects, especially the ones that have multiple options of high school offers, they are going to be committed. They want to be committed before their senior season in high school starts. And we're just not seeing that right now at FSU. And it's, again, I hate to use the word so many times, but frustrating that we're just not getting there. And I don't know if it's a recruiting strategy. I think for, Willie's, going back to Willie, his biggest problem was, he had the number one player basically in every position in the country at Seminole Showtime his first year. And then the season happened. So he didn't have a plan B, C, D. And I'm not sure Mike has a plan B, C, D either, because I think he knows who he wants. And when they end up elsewhere, I think he just starts to scramble. And that's been a concerning trend year over year since he's been here.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm certainly not anti, nor like I want him to work out. I want us to recruit well. I want us to get elite guys. But man, just how many times do you have to see it and see it blow up in our face? Whether it's guys flipping on signing day, whether it be you're not getting enough elite guys in, whether it just whatever the situation is. And I get it. They went 2-10 last year. Well, let me tell you something. They won 10 games 2 years before that, and they won 13 games the year before that. And we didn't really see it capitalized then either. And so, last year sucked, and we might be dealing with some negative ramifications for that. But no matter what the issues are, this is still Florida State, right? And I watched Mario have a below 500 record and recruit in the top 10. And I've seen Napier in a couple of years have very bad records and recruit around the top 10. They went 7-5 this year and recruited like the number 8 class. I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes you just got to get out there and do it. Auburn, same way. And I get it. Those programs spend money. Those programs pay up. I understand that. But at the end of the day, this is still Florida State. And it's just ultimately not good enough. If last year would have happened and there was a plethora of young talent sitting on the bench and you just said, like, just wait till next year, right? We'll rebound. That'd be one thing, right? But the reason we couldn't go to our young guys was because they weren't very good either, right? We've got some studs. They've recruited well. And you think about Charles Lester and some of the other guys they brought in. That's not a slam at everybody. But yeah, when you're stacking top 20-ish classes year after year after year, you don't have guys that are day one ready. And they continue to kind of lose out on some of those guys. So I don't know, not trying to, it's almost just, I'm not maybe we are sounding the alarms, right? Maybe we are kind of being negative about it, but yeah, they're just not, they're not winning enough battles against the elites. And so they're not winning any battles against the elites. Let's be real. They're winning very few battles against the teams that are, I'd say, comparable to them. And then they're starting to lose battles to teams they shouldn't lose battles to. And I don't care if it's NIL. I don't care if it's this. I don't care if it's that, the other, whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of excuses you can make. Sometimes you just got to nut up and be Florida State and win a battle, right? And so, yeah, I did see they signed a long snapper today. So good,
Nice.
good stuff there. So there, all the negative, at least they got some, he'll probably have plenty of, never mind. He'll probably
Our
get
special
plenty of,
teams will always be elite.
he'll probably get plenty of action with the way the rest of the recruiting goes. So, it probably is smart to have somebody that's pretty good there. So, all right, that's all I got on recruiting. I saw Luke Laux picked up a transfer or signed a kid transfer. So, hey, at least there's some things moving and shaking over there on the hoop side. Okay, let's ask this. We'll wrap up with this. What are realistic expectations for Florida State under Luke Laux? Like, is it to make the tournament like every 2 out of every 5 years? Is it more than that? Is it less than that? And not necessarily in year one, but what are real expectations?
I'd say 3 out of 5 years, I think, is a realistic expectation. Just because Florida State does not have any money for basketball NIL. All the money goes to football, which, quite frankly, is where I believe it should go, even though I'm a FSU basketball fan as well. But yeah, the kid, his name escapes me right now, but he shot 44% from three. He's a sniper. Luke is looking. I think he's looking to, and it's going to be difficult, obviously, easier said than done, emulate what was going on during his time with the Warriors. He wants to have, you think about Alabama, Nate Oates, the head coach there, he only wants Alabama to either shoot threes or inside the paint. He doesn't want these mid-range jump shots because they're the lowest percentage to make. Highest percentage shot in college basketball and in the NBA is a corner three. You're trying to create those. That's what you want. So I think Luke is going to look for snipers. And if he can continue to do that, obviously this is just one, but if he can add more, because I don't know if you noticed, half the team is left or hit the portal.
Or more, yeah.
And I don't think it's, by coincidence. I think Luke probably encouraged them and said, this roster is just, I love Coach Ham, but this roster that he's put together is not going to work for me. And he's going to go out and try and put a roster together that will work for him. I doubt they get to the tournament next year, but I do think his upward trajectory in the NBA, even just as an assistant, and the fact that Florida State felt comfortable taking him over Sam Cassell, who I heard was very interested in the job. I think that says a lot. I think I'm excited to see what the future looks like with Luke Laux. It may not pay dividends next season, but definitely in the next 2 or 3 seasons.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think it's a good, it's good to have like what the right expectations are. I certainly don't have an expectation that this is going to be a team that competes for, insane kind of heights, but it would be nice to be, fairly competitive. The ACC is terrible.
And look at Florida's roster. Honestly, Florida does not have a ton of highly ranked high school prospects on the roster. As much as I love to hate on Todd Golden, he's done a phenomenal job with this team. So you don't need a bunch of 5 stars. Some of those Florida State teams that, that won we had Scotty Barnes, right? But that 2020 team wasn't full of 5 stars. You had a bunch of 3 and 4 stars as well. So you can win despite the level of talent, because how often do you see a team full of 5 stars get knocked out in the round of 32 in the NCAA tournament? It happens all the time. Yep. So I don't know what kind of head coach Luke Laux will be, but I know he has the requisite experience, and I'm excited to see what happens.
Yeah, it's actually kind of disgusting to see, most of Florida's starters were like 0 stars or nobody. I mean, it's a credit to the, never mind. I won't make that joke, but it's a credit to their coach for finding them in the portal and doing a good job building a roster and getting guys that would be there for a couple of years. a lot of talent on that team. So again, in Cooper Flag, we trust. Richie, got any shout outs or anything before we get out of here?
Yeah, shout out CBS. I'm trying to watch the Michigan State game, and all we have is severe thunder or severe weather with tornado warnings in my county. So I guess I understand that. But yeah, shout out CBS for making me miss the game here.
Yeah, today's my dad's birthday. Shout out to him. So shout out the OG in this family. So that's all I got. Hey, I appreciate Guthrie's Guarding Gold, BetUS TV. Appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. We will talk to you soon. We'll be back next Sunday to talk about this a little bit more. Hopefully we won't have a Florida. Well, I guess the game won't have happened yet. So yeah, we'll be back next Sunday to talk more. There's another scrimmage in Tallahassee next Saturday, I believe. Saturday morning, 10:30 is what I believe is happening. So hopefully we'll have more updates for you on that. Hopefully we've got some positive recruiting news to talk about. Fingers crossed on that. We will chat with you guys soon. Go to Holes.